Thank you very much. We now are set to discuss green mobility in our next session. Climate change is a reality. Carbon emissions are a global concern. And India is looking to transform and transport by turning to electric vehicles. The new economic order is sustainable, and it is time for India to rebuild for a greener future. At the India Economic Summit 2021, we bring together movers and shakers from the field to deliberate and discuss the green mobility shift and the economic opportunity it holds.
India has set the target, net zero by 2070. Now, the spotlight is on the automobile industry. Vehicular emissions remain a concern. The impact on health, climate, and the economy. Sustainability of the wheels is the only way forward. Incentives to rebuild mobility for a green future are out there.
The government is supporting domestic manufacturing and encouraging localization of all EV parts. And now our research is on the final stage. This futuristic development is very, very important as far as our ecology, environment and economy is concerned.
Are we ready to shift gears and go green? Is the 30% EVs by 2030 mission possible? This session of the India Economic Summit 2021 is pivoted around answering questions on the future of sustainable mobility. Darwin Platform Group of Companies presents the Green Mobility Shift.
Sales, Marketing and Service at Hyundai Motor India. Tarun was with Maruti Suzuki for about 25 years, where he revamped the used car business before joining Hyundai as Director Marketing. At Hyundai, he is driving the organization towards sustainability. Ravneet Pukela, Chief Business Officer at the Ather Energy, a startup that focuses on designing and selling premium electric two-wheelers for the Indian market. With Ather, Ravneet is shifting gears on what the transportation market will look like by bringing in high performance, zero maintenance and smart electric vehicles. Randhir Singh, Director at Electric Mobility for Niti Aayog. At a time when Niti Aayog has started the Shunya India campaign to accelerate the electrification of final mile deliveries by creating a special label for electric deliveries, Mr. Singh is the man at the helm. Mr. Malo Le Masson, Head of Strategy and Global Product Planning at Hero MotoCorp, has valued experience and immense expertise in product planning and management. He has previously worked with Nissan Motor Company and has contributed to electric vehicle engineering through many projects. To steer the discussion, may I invite from Republic, the Executive Editor Niranjan Narayanaswamy and Republic Bharat's Sucharita Kukreti. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for our green mobility panel.
Okay, so we had a fantastic setup to this panel. Actually, I don't have to introduce anyone because we had the Union Minister, Mr. Nitin Gadkari. Fantastic setup. He was so excited about green mobility and electric vehicles, alternative fuels. So many questions that came to our mind just listening to him. So Tarun Garg, Randhir, Ravneet and Malo, it's an exciting time to have this conversation, right? Let me start with you, Tarun. Look at electric vehicles. I mean, I'm just putting myself in the shoes of a consumer because I am. The first question that I have in my mind when I look at an electric vehicle or a vehicle with an alternative fuel is the pricing and the range, right? And how are you looking at it and working towards making it affordable and making sure that it is the option for consumers?
Thank you, Niranjan. I think you have brought in a very, very important point. And before I come to those factors affecting the customer decision, I think what is very important to know is that as far as Hyundai is concerned, we are driven by our global vision for progress for humanity. And we believe very strongly that it is the humanity which unites us, makes us stronger. And you would have known that Hyundai Motor Company is in progress to achieve carbon neutrality by 2045. So obviously we are all driven by that, and that has really been a very, very important factor in making our investment decisions. So of course today everybody is talking about electric vehicles, but let me take you back a couple of years back, 2019, when electric vehicles was just being talked about. Hyundai launched the Kona Electric, which was the first fully electric SUV in India and received some great response. Now, what is it which made Kona work? And also gave us some insights. And now I come to your question, So there are three aspects, which drive a customer towards either going for an IC or going for electric. The first and the foremost is, of course, the range anxiety, and the charging infrastructure. Now, when I come to range, and we understood that part, and Kona provided a range of 450 kilometers. And let me share with you, an average Indian is driving only 30 kilometers a day. So while some of us may feel that we need a very big range, but actually we drive only about 1,000 kilometers a month on an average.
Yeah.
So 450 kilometers, you can see, it really takes care of the range part of it. Then the second aspect is, how do I charge my car? So we provided a charger, which could really be fit in the home, and a car could charge overnight. Yeah. So there was actually no use of a public charging, as you say. Yeah. The third aspect is, okay, what do I get if I get stuck? If I'm on the road and I lose, the battery, or I'm stuck in a traffic jam. So we said, okay, we'll provide V2V, vehicle-to-vehicle charging as well. So my point is that, we were able to really, really take care of some of those issues which the customer really wanted. At the same time, one very key factor here is affordability.
Yeah.
Now this is where, we still need some more time. Because at that price, probably it is only a niche segment, in which we are operating in. And that is where I believe, and our friend from Niti Aayog is here, I'm really thankful to the government of India, where they launched the PLI scheme, where we're talking about the Atmanirbhar Bharat, where we're talking about the localization. And as far as Hyundai is concerned, we are really on our localization path, and we are working on the entire ecosystem, whether it is to work with the battery manufacturers to see what we can do on the localization part of it, or on the charging infrastructure part of it as well. So I think that there is still some time to go when we can really cross that affordability aspect as well. But we have already announced that we are working on a mass market EV, and in probably less than 3 years, we should be ready with a mass market EV, which will take care of that third most important aspect of affordability also.
And I think we all are sitting doing this conclave in Delhi, where there is a complete ban on all vehicles from outside till 3rd December except CNG and electric. So that gives us an impetus to speak about green mobility today, I think, Randir. That really does, because that is the way forward, you think?
You are right. So we have to understand few things when we talk about the shift to the green mobility. What are the dynamics in our country? So Indian trajectory of change to the green mobility is going to be very different whatever is in the West. We are almost 81% two-wheeler market with around 3% three-wheeler market. We are not like the West, which is dominated by the four-wheeler. So in India, the market is being led by the e-rickshaws.
Yeah.
So if almost 2 million plus e-rickshaws are flying. So two-wheeler and three-wheeler is going to change the trajectory within the green shift. This is going to be the first thing for us. So if I talk about the policies, so last 4 months, those are very crucial. 3 big announcements were made in terms of the PLI, as Garg also said. First is the FAME 2 remodeling. That means 10,000 crores, INR 10,000 crores is the total outlay for the FAME 2. Plus, it has been increased up to 2024. So that means we still have time. Whatever time we lost during this COVID times, that could be recuperated during this period. This is one. This is for the demand side. Now, in EV, there are three components. One is the supply side, manufacturing side, and the demand side. This caters to the demand side. There was another section of 40% of the total vehicle cost, that is the battery side. This has been tackled by the ACC program, Advanced Chemistry Cell program, which is 18,100 crores. Third is the OEMs and the manufacturers, which comes in the middle. That has been tackled through the auto PLI. So now, from the government perspective, I think entire value chain, entire ecosystem has been covered. Now it is up to the industry. They should take up this initiative. They should also come forward to take the steps which are much needed right now for this green shift.
Yeah. And then you have a government which is really sort of pushing all of you and is as excited as all of you, right? Malo, let me ask you this question. What is the future that you at Hero are looking at? Because I know that Hero is very excited about the electric vehicle business and bikes. And you look at the market that we have, 50%, I think I was reading somewhere that it's anywhere between 45 to 50% of households in India own a bike. And there are anywhere between, I think China's selling about 20 million bikes a year and India is almost there, right? What are the opportunities that you see?
I think Randir said it perfectly. The trajectory for India will start from the mass mobility and the way that we move all together. First is primarily, so either in a shared mobility, either through two-wheelers. So that's one fundamental thing. The second thing, always when I look back, and it's also tied up to your previous question, about affordability. Affordability is not always the key answer, because the one thing that you first need to have as a consumer is a perfect experience, which means like I'll maybe a little bit compromise on some range, but I don't want to do too much. EVs are not new to India. I mean, there was lead-acid batteries and there are still scooters existing, but they never picked up because you always had, let's say, one compromise. I think the key change now that we have, basically, there is three things that you require for takeoff on EV. So one, you start by the demand. And I think that the great work which has been done through, of course, the advice of Niti Aayog by the government on incentives. And you look globally, there is no one market in the world that have taken up without incentive. Yeah? Yes. So that's a given you need to have. And 2015 FAME 1, 2019 FAME 2, now extended, improved. You need to have that. You need to have this roadmap. Because once you have that conducive, then you go to the next phase, which is you incentivize people like us, OEMs, to actually invest for long term. When I'm talking about investment, just to give you a sense of scale, just Hero MotoCorp alone, we have already earmarked and committed 5,000 crore investment just for 5 years, just for the next 5 years.
Right.
So that's the level of investment that goes into an EV, and that's why you need to have those policies which are long-term and established. So, and that takes care of the point number 2, which is you need to have an offer. Actually, I can tell you that I need to have, of course, I need to have Ether success because, I mean, we have
you have two competitors.
Exactly. No, but we are also, we have a foot in the door. So I would call it, so you need to have Ether succeed, but you equally need to have Ola or whoever is coming, because you're different than me or you, so which means your choices are different. As a consumer, you want to have choices.
Yeah.
So as long as you have the offer which is there, then it's better. And the last part, the third point, is about the infrastructure. And I think today, a lot of announcement, which is good on a lot of tie-ups, which are being announced either from OEMs or even through the government pushing that. Maybe on the ground it's still a bit lacking, but we are really at the turning point, I think, especially for India on that.
Okay, Ravneet, I think what is equally important is because as Niranjan spoke about Nitin Gadkari here in the morning session, and he very candidly spoke to us about how he drives an EV in Nagpur and he owns it with a lot of pride. So you at Ather are not just investing in EVs, but you're also investing in the infrastructure alongside. That is equally important if we need to move into the right directions with the EVs as the way forward, right?
See, it is, and it's a bit awkward when having invested in infrastructure, I tell you it's not the biggest problem. I'll tell you why I say that, right? In some way echoing what you said about how much people ride. So, unlike cars, scooters are very utilitarian commute, right? It's about 20-22 kilometers a day. Any good scooter should give you a range of 80, 85, 90 onwards, right? Which means that at any point in time, we have 3 or 4 days of range. Couple that with the dominant charging behavior of overnight charging. It's pretty much echoes and mirrors how you treat your cell phones, right? You come back at home, wait for charging, wake up in the morning and you have a full charge. People do exactly that with that. So really the role for public infra at this point in time is essentially to allay any anxiety that people have. Bear in mind, we are in the infancy phase of the industry where, and today a lack of range is a perception problem. However, where this perception reality is as an OEM's my problem to solve. So we are solving that, right? Eventually, I think there'll be a case for public charging, but purely as a top-up solution. Nobody goes from zero, and the fundamental difference in refueling between petrol and electric is unlike petrol where you go in empty tank, come out with a full tank, no one does that in electrics. Nowhere in the world, right? You go in purely as a top-up, unless you're on highway, which is a different use case. Maybe you're at 20, 25, 30% charge. You're nervous about getting back to where you want to get to. You go there, stay there for half an hour, get 30, 40 kilometers of range, then off you go. And then your dominant behavior overnight charging takes over, right? So we do have a public infrastructure. I'll give you another statistic, right? So we have data for all our customers who've ridden these bikes, and that adds up to 70 million kilometers. So that's like a fair bit of data in terms of just the size, right? So about 76% of all charging happens at home. Like 22% of charging happens in people's offices, which is similar to home, which is where you're using dead time for charging, right? Only 4% charging happens in public domain on our chargers. Bear in mind, since the time we launched it 3 years back, we don't charge a penny for charging. It's absolutely free.
Okay, Ravneet, I'm sorry to interject you, but see, I'm talking about the practical problems because here people who are sitting, if I think of taking an EV, and I'm not talking about scooters alone, I'm also talking about cars. Now, if I'm staying in a high rise, how do I practically charge my car every day? How do I charge my scooters are different, cars are different, and this I'm asking because I was reading up on people's problems. People had put up, a lot of people ask this question every day. So we need to give them a viable answer to these problems.
It's actually the issue is still the same. Whether it's a scooter or a car, you still park on the same floor, right? And we've seen that time and again across every city that we're in. So take what you might believe to be the most challenging use case. You're living in a high-rise condo on the 20th floor, right? But typically, right? I'm going to say typically, 90% of cases is that wherever you park your scooter or your car would also be a place where the condo would have all the meter rooms. So you simply pull a cable from your personal meter to where you park your car or a scooter and you put a charger there. Everybody gives a charger, whether Hyundai, whether it's us, gives a charger with that. So which is why, so places like Bombay, places like Gurgaon, places like Bangalore with high rises, people are, surely there'll be like 5, 7, 10% cases where you don't have the option, but those are exceptions more than the rule.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to come back. So I think the one thing that we should try to look at is not at the one silver bullet, because again, all our usage is different, so which means there'll be people that have the opportunity to charge in their condominium, there'll be people that will not have, and this is why for me it's equally important, and we've talked it maybe not be a need, but at least an anxiety, so you'll need to have those infrastructure developed also, and this is why you have sometimes private OEMs tying up with other energy partners installing infrastructure. You also need to have government setting it up. The other part also, for example, there might be some cases whereby your usage is more than mine, there is one thing, for example, which is still that we're trying to push is, for example, incentive even for a battery swapping business. Because you may be able to charge at night depending on your usage and then, in the daytime, but you may have a very intense usage and no possibility to actually plug in. And then an offer of a different business model whereby you just swap your battery, get a fully charged and just go in less than 10 seconds is also equally an offer. So, and I don't see them directly as competing, I see them as complementing each other for the consumer.
If I can just add to that and then toss a question to Tarun, I think mindsets are changing because, in societies, we're also seeing, witnessing that societies are making it sort of mandatory part of their infrastructure plan to install these chargers nowadays, right? So in that sense, is there going to be a sudden shift? Because the minister made a very interesting announcement today without talking about it till it happens. Of course, he said, Mr. Gadkari said that he's in the works. What's in the works is a bill that will ensure that flex engines could be mandatory in the next 6 months. Now, in the backdrop of that, Sucharita just mentioned about the initiatives that Delhi is taking to ensure that only CNG and EV vehicles can enter Delhi, right? So there's something happening, right? Can there be a sudden shift? And when that shift happens, right, are we going to see sort of this burst of electric and green vehicles?
So look, very difficult to predict this sudden shift or what would be that trigger. But what I can say is, I'll give you some simple examples, Today you read a newspaper, at every day there would be at least 4 or 5 articles on sustainability.
Yeah.
6 months back, there was none. I think the awareness has really gone up. You see, everybody's talking about sustainability. People know that, yes, we have to do it for the Mother Earth. We have to do it for the future generations.
Right.
So it is not only the OEMs, it is the customers, it is the government. I believe the entire ecosystem is moving towards that. That said, frankly speaking, I can talk about cars. Today, probably it's less than 1%, the penetration of EVs. Even your anchor said that government says that 30% by 2030.
Yeah.
So, I mean, even the best of estimates. So, I don't see that shift will happen from 1 to 100 in a day.
Yeah.
At the same time, that does not mean that we don't have to do. That means that we have to really be on that path and see that as and when that transition happens, it is as smooth as possible, and all of us are together investing into it. Because I think the important aspect here is, and I was, talking about even the charging infrastructure. Like, for example, as OEMs, we have a big network. So today, at our 108 dealer workshops, we have a charging station. So to answer your question,
Right.
And then we also have connected cars, which means you will know very easily probably where the charging infrastructure is and you can get your car charged. Then there would be those partnerships, we have always talked about public-private partnerships. So we have tied up with IOC, and we have some charging stations, which have fast chargers in Mumbai, Delhi, Bangalore. So my point is that this is just the beginning of that journey. There is still a lot of work to be done. But I believe probably this COVID, probably our sensitivity to environment, probably this Glasgow, but everybody has made a commitment. Our Honorable Prime Minister has said that 2070, India is going to be carbon neutral. I already mentioned about Hyundai Motor Company, where we are in progress to achieve carbon neutrality by 2045. So I think that the task is definitely, writing is on the wall and we can clearly see it. And we have our own way to reach there, sooner or later.
I just pick up, if I can just, ask a follow-up to that. You mentioned that petrol pumps, fuel pumps, the traditional fuel pumps as we know it, can double up as charging stations, right? And I came across this stat that said that 10,000, is that, I read somewhere that 10,000 fuel stations will start adding these electric charging points. Now, is that going to be a game changer? You think that's going to change the game altogether?
No, if that happens, of course, on behalf of government, you answer, probably
Randeep can answer that.
Of course, if it happens, then it is going to be a game changer for sure.
But is it in the plans? Is it going? Is the policy?
I'm not sure as of now, but I think I have seen the advertisement by the IOCL that they have already asked the EOIs for putting up the charging infrastructure. I'll take the question which you asked regarding this shift. So on what parameters the shift depends? Shift depends upon the availability and the affordability on those things. Whether the enough EVs are available, and if they are available, whether they are at the right price point or not.
Yeah.
Everybody knows we are the price sensitive market. So now, in past, in fact last 2 to 3 years, the decline in the battery prices, which comprises of 40% of the total EV price, it is declining like anything. Once it reaches by 2023 to 2024, $100 per kilowatt hour. That is the inflection point when there is no question about, you will not be asking this question.
But can the government do something about that? I think Tarun and everybody will be excited about that, to reduce the prices further. It's going to help everyone in the audience.
Actually, ACC program is targeted towards this only, the cell manufacturing. So right now, $137 per kilowatt of VNF report says, this is for the global prices, not for us. But with the ACC program, which is 18,100 crore, after this localization, this is the price point which we are going to achieve.
Okay.
That is when it will be more affordable.
Ravneet had something to say.
Yeah, so I think I'll just add your original point about charging infra. Right, so whenever the question like that comes in, like, hey, 10,000 chargers are coming, is that a game changer? Surely in terms of scale, it's a game changer. But implicit in that question is the assumption that because there's no infra, there is no uptake of vehicles, which is not true at all.
Yeah.
today, we are limited by our ability to supply great products and give consumers a choice. There is infinitely more demand outside than the ability of the OEMs to service that demand. Right? So charging infra is important. It's not the biggest deterrent. It's a red herring. It's not the biggest deterrent. It's really the ability. If you look at, you could just contrast EVs with petrol. If you look at cars, every 1 lakh you have like 15 options. If you look at electric, how many options do you have? So to say, hey, cars are not selling, where are the options? Like if you look at scooters, how many options do you have? Credible options, right?
Yeah.
So really, it's the supply side that's the problem, which goes all the way back to supply chain where things like PLI sort of come into play, as opposed to, and which is the good news about this business today, right? There is enough consumer demand, right? If we didn't have that, we'd be in trouble. So we don't have that problem. Is how soon can the OEMs like ourselves, like Hyundai, pick the baton from the government, because the government done a lot, and then the ball is fairly in our court to say, how do we scale up from here, whether it's OEMs or supply chain. Once you crack that, I can tell you, we can see change is coming much faster than we'd anticipated. I'll give you one example, right? Just 10 months back, 11 months back, last Christmas, we moved to a new factory with 3x the capacity that we had from the original factory, right? 10 months later, we are back in the market, and in fact, we just signed up for another factory which makes it 4x. We got it completely wrong. It's coming much faster than we anticipated, much go ahead.
So as Ravneet says, there is demand, there obviously is demand, and that is why all of you are here and you're talking about EVs. There is demand, the infrastructure is also not much of a deterrent, it's working alongside. So are we going to be are we moving towards an EV revolution? It may not be a sudden shift, but is this an EV revolution? Because we are seeing almost as many as 250 startups that are working on the EV technology, and there is obviously all of you there. So is it like an EV revolution happening soon?
Yeah, I think, and we're living it, to be fair. Though there is just one thing I just would like to come back. When we talk about infrastructure, the one thing we should still remember is you can still have 10,000, for example, charging point in the fuel station. The charging speed of an EV is different, which means we're in a fuel station, you arrive, you charge, after 5 minutes you have left the spot for another car to come. In an EV, you don't leave that fast, which means you need more of those points because the number of cars on the road are the same, or two-wheeler. Which goes back again to a point, and we've signed a partnership about a year ago with, a bit less than that, with Gogoro, a Taiwanese startup, which is the leader in battery swapping. Because the firm belief is, again, there won't be one size fits all. And that will enable, actually, for example, battery swapping is a beautiful business. It's a difficult business model, but it's a beautiful customer solution. I can actually charge an electric vehicle in 10 seconds. I just come, remove, and do that. So once you start to have all those different offers coming, all those different technology and business model coming, this is where you start to ignite what you're talking about, an EV revolution. And this is, we'll see, but let's look also globally again, and it's always good to look at what has happened in the world with, of course, different structure, different price point, and so on. You'll still go through an S-curve. And it's very important that we all understand that the commitment that we're all doing as OEMs, the commitment that the government is doing through incentives, so all of that are things which takes time, because until you are at the tipping point and the inflection point, as soon as you withdraw, and we were just discussing that earlier, Denmark is a very good example. They started long back on EV incentive. 2015, 2016, they withdrew it. The market crashed. And then they say, oh, we need to put it back. China, which of course we all know has been leading, especially in two-wheeler EV, the market, and pushing also for four-wheeler, have fantastic incentive plan, and they just, okay, at some point I'll just start to remove them and taper down. And then they found out that the market was starting to go much faster down than they expected. So you need to have this tipping point so that there is market inertia. But until that, we all need to stay committed and focused.
Marlon, interoperability and the battery swapping. That is something which also needs to be tackled first, right?
Ravneet, we've covered, we know that it's going to happen. Sooner or later, I think that shift is going to happen, and we're all gearing up for that. Let's talk about the manufacturers that we have, right? All of you are in the business, at least three of you. You're an example of an Indian manufacturer. And just before coming into this conversation, you were telling me about how the bikes were designed and made by a bunch of people who just drew it out and said, we need to now put the parts together. It's a fantastic story. So that's the Indian story, right? That's how we do business, right? From scratch. But there is also this attempt from the likes of the Teslas, and everyone's got their eyes on India. So as an Indian manufacturer, what's your take on the big guys trying to enter?
So I think at this point in time, honestly, to use a cliche, is more the merrier. We are just too early in our journey to start worrying about who's here, who's not here, right? We are 1% of the market. So anybody who's worrying about competition is worrying about the wrong things, right? We should be just worrying about, how do we grow the business, how do we grow the category, how do we mature the supply chain, which is the biggest deterrent today, how do we get local manufacturing up and running, how do we get the PLI scheme up and running. And at this point in time, anybody who comes in just injects the excitement in yet another segment, right?
Yeah.
So if Tesla comes in, injects excitement. When Ola made the announcement, suddenly the awareness starts for all OEMs became easy because one big guy came in, right? When Bajaj jumps in, things will change, right? Again, at this point in time, all you need is good, strong, credible people coming in with good, strong, credible products. What you don't need is numbers randomly. What you don't need is people who are coming into the market opportunistically with not great product, because that kills the market. But listen, Tesla comes in, they'll shake things up, which is great, right? And on the back of that excitement, market grows, which is what all of us are looking for.
Yeah.
Okay, I think, Tarun, also, let's speak of it from the very basic maths point of view. I was reading somewhere that if I'm spending something like 15 or 20 grand on my fuel for a month, I will be spending as less as 2,000 on electricity for the same car. Now that makes it very exciting. I would want to own a car which only makes me spend 2,000 on my fuel, on electricity. So is it that economically viable?
Yeah, I can share my own example.
Please do.
Yeah, so I charge my Kona at home, and about 350 rupees electricity, and it runs 350 kilometers. So 1 rupee is a kilometer. Now, the most fuel efficient cars obviously would still take about 7-8 rupees a kilometer. I think Mr. Gadkari also gave this example in the morning. So definitely in terms of running, and I believe that is one factor which has probably changed the dynamics, because when you're into car buying, you talk about the total cost of ownership. It is not only the acquisition cost, but also the running cost. Now the fuel cost, which used to be about 70 rupees, just about a year back probably, is now 100 rupees. So obviously that total cost of ownership cycle has really reduced. So I think this is also probably will expedite the shift towards EVs. But affordability is obviously very, very important. And there I believe localization is going to play a very, very important role. Yeah. So I think it's linked to that. But we can see enough indicators, we can see enough, and like I said, as long as OEMs we are committed, probably we can really expedite this. At the same time, we need to really invest a lot of money, which means we need to really continue to produce efficiently, and also, frankly speaking, also make sure that our own manufacturing plants, there also we are talking about sustainability. Like for example, if I talk about Chennai, our own Chennai plant, we use 89% renewable energy. We almost 100% of rainwater harvesting. We have 6 ponds. So my point is that it is not only limited to two-wheelers or cars. I think the entire ecosystem will have to be scanned by a lens, and we'll have to see how together we can really see that we are using more and more of renewable energy and emitting, which means we need to really continue to produce efficiently, and also, frankly speaking, also make sure that our own manufacturing plants, there also we are talking about sustainability. Like for example, if I talk about Chennai, our own Chennai plant, we use 89% renewable energy. We almost 100% of rainwater harvesting. We have 6 ponds. So my point is that it is not only limited to two-wheelers or cars. I think the entire ecosystem will have to be scanned by a lens, and we'll have to see how together we can really see that we are using more and more of renewable energy and emitting less and less of those pollutants. Yeah. So I think the entire thing has to really fall into place, and the best part is this realization is really, really coming very, very fast, and inclusivity there is also coming. Like our employees are talking about, yes, I need to be a part of it. I think that is very, very important, and that I believe will be the biggest game changer here.
I'm just going to make a small point to what he said, and I want you to take that question. When Indians buy cars, right, you go to a store and you ask for a brochure, and then you get 10 slabs, and then you have petrol base version, and then you have, diesel, and then you have electric. Like some cars have that, right? And then you see electric vehicle right at the end. Like the most expensive model will be the electric vehicle version, right? No, Indians are very price conscious. So you think of buying a petrol car and you think of the operating cost, and you mentioned how there's no difference anymore between petrol and diesel is still more expensive. And now you have electric vehicles, and Indians are very price conscious, and now you know that running an electric vehicle is the cheapest option. So you can take that question, Malo. Is that mindset change going to happen, and do you think there needs to be some push towards that change? Because I'll tell you one thing that's happened in the last 2 years since COVID is that we as a country have changed the way we look at obstacles. We feel something is not achievable, but then when there's a push, and there's suddenly a mindset change because you end up doing it. Do you think we're moving towards that direction when it comes to green mobility?
The first thing, and I think Tarun said it perfectly. So of course, cost of ownership is what I would call it a delighter. And no doubt today, because of fuel price getting high and high, people are seeing even more the economical balance of an electric vehicle. But what I'm saying it's a delighter is because, again, 4, 5, 6 years ago there was already electric vehicles existing, whether two-wheeler, whether cars. But people were not looking at the same way. For a simple reason is, one, they were not of a good quality, they were not performance, a viable option, and also because the cost of acquisition, the affordability, and for me this is the point. So people, when they look at both those components together. And I think the key thing which has changed, like just, again, very recently, we're talking about just in this year, thanks to the fame, not only increase in terms of duration, but also increase in terms of the amount, it enables suddenly a two-wheeler EV to become much more affordable, and that is being backed up after even by the states. Each state is now providing, let's say, local support, making EV affordable. So suddenly, for a consumer, something that, just as you said, maybe before I was buying a vehicle at a 60,000 rupee and then looking up to a 1 lakh and, my God, I cannot afford it. Now this 1 lakh is coming down to a 70 and 70. And you're like, oh, maybe I can. And then you're looking at what I have at the end of the month. That's when I recharge, it will be barely visible in my electricity bill. And I think this is why, especially right now, we're living in a beautiful place, because especially at least for two-wheeler, the level of incentive is, I would call it, let's say, world-class. And that will enable, let's say, a change and a shift in mobility.
Yeah. And also, Malo, I'd like to tell you this, that when Nitin Gadkari was here, he said that he went to the e-bicycle plant by Hero, and he said that he spoke with a lot of optimism, Randir, and he said that we can be on a fast track and we can actually be leading this story of EV. So he said that we could be we could be a market of almost 50% of the EV share in the time to come, the EV market. So would you share that optimism, Randir, as the minister said, that we could be the front runners in the EV market?
Definitely, I mean, there's no doubt on that. Regarding this total price or the EV at the last and the highly priced, we have to look at it as a total cost of ownership. Tarun also talked about it. So it includes everything. You have 22 moving parts versus 2200 moving parts in IC. More the moving parts, more the cost after service. So not only number of moving parts are decreasing by 100, your service charges, your long-term charges, those are also reducing proportionally. So it's not only about the electricity cost only, but the after-sales service, the financing cost, all those things also reduces.
Yeah.
So on total cost of ownership perspective, two-wheelers are, if not less, then at least at par with the IC already, with the remodeled FAME 2 already.
Yeah.
So in some states, in fact, it's lower also, like Goa and all, you will find it cheaper than the IC vehicles.
Yeah.
So at the total cost of ownership levels, you are already there.
Yeah. Ravneet, there are many misconceptions when it comes to electric vehicles. One of them, like he mentioned, you think that it's expensive to maintain, and some may feel that it's not as exciting to ride as a traditional like a petrol or a diesel vehicle. So is there a misconception, and what do you feel among your consumers? What is the feedback that you get?
See, I think while it's a misconception, certainly in India, it doesn't exist for the wrong reasons, because there was a whole spate of products initially that came in, which were just sluggish and slow and just not great products, right? And for any new category where awareness is low, people judge the entire category based on what they see, and what they saw wasn't really great. So you can't really blame people for feeling what they felt, right? But the truth about electric vehicles can't be further away from what people feel today, right? It fundamentally is a better vehicle. Like when we talk about TCO and price and all that, this is important, but we assume that, hey, listen, both products are similar, one is cheaper to run. But when you ride an electric vehicle or drive an electric car, it's very difficult to come back from there, because it's fundamentally better experience. Whether it's the torque, acceleration, the low NVH, and just the drive feel, it's infinitely different, right? And which is what people love. Like, so you wouldn't associate thrill and excitement and acceleration with a scooter. But we did just for a lark, just for fun. We took the Enfield, the bike that you ride and love. Sorry, I'm going to diss that a bit. Okay, so we took the Bullet. We took some high-end bikes like 650cc bikes. We took some 200cc bikes, and we took the Aether. We did some 6-7 different kind of stuff, acceleration and obstacle race, just for fun, right? You'd be surprised where the scooter ended up, right? Because it's in the way it picks up, that's the inherent property of electric, right? Instant torque. It's just the kick it gives you is unbelievable, right? And I think that's what people are not recognizing enough. Like, people buy Tesla not because it's green and saves the world. It's because it's a great sports car, right? And the moment you recognize that, and which is what we've seen in the last 3 years that we've been selling, right? People are not just buying for. Actually, I'll go out on a limb and say that, right? So nobody pays a penny to save the world. Unless the product fundamentally does the job that it does.
Yeah.
We've been selling scooters for the last 12 years in this country, right? And everybody understands it's good for the environment. People live in Delhi, you see the environment, etc., right? By that logic, we should be selling in millions. We don't, right? Because if the product fundamentally isn't good enough, then you're expecting the customer to make a compromise just to go green. And that never happens, right? So you have to build a product which is a viable alternative to a petrol counterpart, which, by the way, are great products, right? And then once a customer has, from a performance perspective, has parity to choose from, then they'll make an ethical choice or a conscious choice. But to expect customers to compromise on what a product is meant to do fundamentally, I'll compromise top speed, acceleration, ain't going to happen, right?
Yeah.
So I think, and the other thing which is important also from a pricing perspective, the moment consumers see this as an upgrade, then the willingness to pay a premium changes completely. Because you won't pay a premium for a parity product, but if you believe this is a better product, then TCO or apart, you'll just pay a premium because, hey, this is just fundamentally better, right? And that's what's driving the market.
Yeah. If I can ask a follow-up question, to Tarun. Tarun, the other misconception is about electric vehicles perhaps being for the cities only, mostly because of the infrastructure, right? But one point that I took away from what Tarun, what Ravneet said was the excitement in tier 2, tier 3 cities about electric vehicles, electric bikes, which is fantastic. But are they made for the highways, for the long drives? How are you looking at the infrastructure challenge? Just to add to that, the Union Minister, Mr. Gadkari, he said his dream project was to build green expressways, Delhi to Dehradun in 2 hours, Leh to Kanyakumari, one straight highway, and he said 24 hours if you can reach, 12 hours. The government has big dreams, right? But along these expressways, where do you see the infrastructure question coming?
I think that's very relevant, and like I mentioned earlier, I think there's a lot of opportunity for partnerships here, with so many players, and of course OEMs are ready to pitch in. We are already in talks, on that. I already mentioned about the IOC example, and you're right. The highways are very good. And you talked about the quality of EVs, and let me share first, the NVH level. I don't know whether you have driven a electric car, you don't even know that it has started, and you end up cranking it because it's totally noiseless. Then that green number plate gives you a kick. So there are a lot of things, because today you need to give that kind of a status symbol also, because it's a new project has to be nurtured, and a customer has to feel very good about it.
Yeah.
So I believe as far as highway infrastructure is concerned, I think a lot of work is being done by the government, and as well as OEMs. But my only point is it will take some time. But it is not difficult. It is not difficult. Probably if you had asked me this question 2 years back, I would have said, no, it doesn't make sense. I mean, it's so much of cost. But I think now there is enough excitement. There are so many startups coming. And I believe that very soon, at least from a range anxiety point of view, from a charging infrastructure point of view, probably next couple of years, a big change is going to happen.
Okay, so give us a picture. What is the current EV percentage in the automobile industry, and how much do you see it in the next 10 years or 20 years? Give us that picture. I want to see it that way.
Look, I don't want to disappoint you, but out of 275 or 1,000 vehicles we sell every month, currently EVs is less than 2,000.
Okay.
But I think that will be a mistake to judge the potential by the performance.
No, so that's exactly why I posed the second question.
So,
how do you see it in the next 10 or 20 years?
Like I said, even worldwide, it is really taking some time, because it depends on a lot of incentives, government incentives, then government also has limitations, then the battery price is coming down. So there are a lot of factors, and India basically, frankly speaking, is not in a position to buy EVs which are more than 20 lakh rupees in huge volumes. So unless the affordability is taken care of, we still feel the percentage is going to be, low. But of course, Randir is here, and I'm sure he'll be able to.
No, I'm going to ask a question to you. What are your plans?
Look, we are at this stage. I would like to keep it a little bit confidential, but yes, I think we feel very strongly that yes, the market is going to be moving towards EVs, and not only EVs. Mr. Gadkari today mentioned about hydrogen, and I was so excited. We just displayed the Nexo hydrogen FCEV outside,
we saw that.
and the kind of excitement I could see in the people. I think, like I said, there is a lot of excitement. But I mean, and we had a startup, discussion before our discussion. I mean, these startups, first thing which is taught is that be patient and look at growth. Don't look to, achieve everything in one day. I believe the EV is also similar, and probably sometimes the journalists want to have, everything to happen probably in 2 days. But my point is, as long as the commitment is there, as long as the intent is there, I believe very strongly that the direction is definitely there, and all of us are really moving towards that cleaner mobility which we are talking about.
Well, absolutely. We can open up to some audience questions as well. If anybody has questions, yes, there's one gentleman in the audience with a question. You can just get him a mic.
If someone could just pass on the mic to the gentleman there.
Yes,
yes, go ahead.
Okay, he's just getting in the mic. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. My name is Kavinder Khurana. I represent Tesla Power USA. It's not the same company as Mr. Elon Musk's Tesla. It's different. We are in energy storage solutions, and we have already opened more than 250 battery charging stations in India. So I have 3 questions, and in the answers to those questions, probably the solutions will also lie. My questions are to Mr. Ranbir. Number 1, when we all know that the battery swapping is the most probable solution for killing the apprehension of consumer to buy EVs, then has there been a policy or a discussion on a policy to standardize the battery type, size and charging ports for all vehicles, which will make it easier for swapping? Question number 2, is there any incentive or subsidy to small entrepreneurs to open the charging stations on the petrol pumps or retail outlets as the oil companies are promoting? And the question number 3 is that is there any time-bound incentive to the consumer to buy EVs? For example, 0 road tax, 0 registration fee, and 0 GST if you buy before 2024. These are the 3 questions, if you can please answer.
Very valid question.
Thank you, sure. So in fact, the first part, battery swapping, in between I told to Malan also, battery swapping has to be coupled with the interoperability. It shouldn't happen that one OEM is giving you an option of battery swapping, and now you are stuck with that OEM for the lifetime. You cannot switch you cannot switch to other OEM for the battery. You have to go to the same operator, you have to go to the same OEM. So there has to be certain minimum standards so that customers get the interoperability option, but it should not hinder the innovation. That's how government, in fact, BIS is working on the standard for the battery swapping, but I can assure you that it is not going to hinder the innovation. It would be limited up to that extent only. This is one. Second question was about incentives. Okay. So in addition to the central government, in fact, most of the state governments, they have already released their EV policies. And there are a lot of demand-side incentives which are built in. In addition to these demand-side incentives, they are also giving some incentives for building the EV charging infrastructure. So in terms of the charging infrastructure, now the shift is from the charging stations to the charging points. That is charging as a service. That is what the shift has happened, and we have to actually shift this because, again, the type of market, the vehicle segments which are going to dominate. Two-wheelers, three-wheelers. So this is the answer to your second question. And the third one was about?
Consumers.
The incentives being given to consumers.
So, not the time bound, but number of units. So, for example, certain states have released the policies and they say 100,000 vehicles or 200,000 vehicles, the incentive for the first 100,000 vehicles, something like this. In fact, Maharashtra has released their EV policy and they say, if you are going to register, early bird discount thing also they are offering before 31st of December or something, and you will get the early bird discounts. So these type of things are there, but of course not the time bound, as long as the policy is valid for 3 years or the 5 years.
So, but
just a follow-up, small one.
Go ahead.
So as a charging station, it is basically a very big dilemma for an entrepreneur to first invest, open the charging stations or charging points, and then wait for the cars to come for charging, which is his argument. So that is the reason most of the people are not interested in investing in charging stations. Therefore, it is important that the government comes up with a subsidy or some incentivization program so that more and more people will come and open charging stations. Otherwise, all this commitment. So you were talking about those 10,000 retail outlets. So what happened is there is a statement from the Ministry of Oil and Petroleum that all three companies, BPCL, HPCL, and IOCL, will open 22,000 charging stations on 22,000 petrol pumps. How will that happen is still not discovered. They still do not know, they do not want to invest. They want people to come and invest. They are ready to give free space, but nobody is coming up because there is no incentive for opening. For 2 years, I'll keep on investing and spending money on keeping the manpower there, but there are no vehicles. So chicken and egg story.
Yes.
So it has to happen from the government side that there is some incentivization or some subsidy policy so that charging stations are also growing along with the EV producers. Thank you.
So I think Randhir is going to answer that, but the other three also need to answer that. Is that a problem? Is that a genuine problem that he's speaking about? Because you guys are into the business.
Tarun has taken up this already. It's a chicken and egg issue, and we shouldn't be in so much hurry that immediately the market should be flooded with this. It will
take time. It will take time, definitely.
If I can, if any other questions from the audience? Okay, there's another question in the audience.
So, automobile is one of the biggest sectors for employment. With the switch to mass scale EVs, the requirement, there'll be a mass change in the manufacturing infrastructure, and how will you switching to large scale fast? How will you do that in large scale? Will you have both IC and EV together at the same time, because it will disrupt the economy? It will be a large scale.
Okay. So
as well as employment.
Yeah, he's trying to speak about the simultaneous.
He's saying when you scale up, and there's going to be a need to also scale up your infrastructure, and then because it's going to generate employment, and do you see that sort of an infrastructure availability, and can you scale up at that speed if there is a sudden shift? You can speak from your example, on how you've had to perhaps scale up, and then Melo can also take that.
Yeah, I think we'll have good, interesting perspective, because they straddle both worlds. HMCV only in electric. So, see, while the pace of change is fast, it's not overnight, right? I mean, while we call ourselves a startup, we've been at it for 8 years now, right? And we still haven't scaled up. We're still grappling with, early stage issues of any industry. So, relative to the legacy auto world, you might say the change is fast, but in absolute, it's not. It's still giving us enough time to, because we're not about manufacturing here, right? So it's not just about somebody setting up a factory, which is honestly the easy part. Setting up a manufacturing and line is the easiest part in the entire game here. It is the supply chain before that, which is about, tier ones coming in, setting up capacity at a level where there is economies of scale, global players coming in here. So there's a whole bunch of things that need to happen before manufacturing can become a reality, right? And that takes time. So it's not one of those things where you wake up one morning and suddenly there's change, you don't know how to handle it. I think we are getting up at a certain speed. But it's not like, unlike China, where there is no gun to anybody's head to say like, hey, from tomorrow morning there is no petrol. And it's not that, right? So EVs and petrol coexist for a while. Transition happens over 8, 10, 12, 15 year period, depending on what vehicle class you're talking about. And that gives enough time for the nation, for the industry, for society to sort of transition from a change perspective, right? So
and
honestly,
also,
don't see a big issue there.
And I think, as Ravneet said, you've been in the business for 8 years, you said. And obviously you saw a potential market there. Otherwise, you would have left it on the way. So you're still there and you're hanging on and you're looking at a potential market that's growing. Am I right?
Yeah, I think as Sanjeev said in the earlier thing, it's about if you have a problem that you think that you're solving, you have to stay the course, right? No manufacturing turned profitable in 5, 7, 10 years. It just doesn't work. If you have a 5, 7 year view,
right,
then you should not be in automobiles. You should be in some other business, right? So I think it's not for the weak-hearted. It's not for the impatient, right? It takes time. But the fact is, like I was saying earlier, is that suddenly change is coming so fast. Biggest problem we have today, till 2 years back, was about educating the customer about why it makes sense, etc. Today, the single biggest problem we have is that how do I get my supplies up so that I can get vehicles to sell, right?
Yeah.
That's the biggest problem, which is an amazing problem to be grappling with, right? So.
Yeah, it's a good problem. 2 questions to you, Manu. You can take that. One is, are you getting the support you need from a policy framework? Randir is here. You can talk about it because the government is very excited. Are you getting the support that you need from the government, from a policy framework? And secondly, what excites a company like Hero? Because you're traditionally a giant on bikes, right? And for you to make that switch, like, what are you thinking when you know that you have to make that switch, and when you know it's still a gambit?
Yeah, on the first question, what do we expect more? I think the government have done so much in the recent time, and even more recently with the PLI, that it's hard to really find. And the last one is what we discussed. Is just the last bit for us is on battery swapping, because we believe that again it's not one or the other. It have to be both.
Yeah.
And you just need to be able to incentivize both business model at the same level, because ultimately it should not be unfair and it should be a level playing field so that the consumer wins. Coming back on the discussion, which was more also what the gentleman was mentioning about the EV to the ICE shift, whether you're, I would say, sometimes we call us, legacy incumbents, or whether you're a startup, you start from, it's a different starting point. The beauty of a startup is you're nimble, you're agile, whatever is the brand that you want to establish, there is no preconceived idea about you, yeah? And you can be fast.
Yeah.
But ultimately, you start to reach some level whereby what Ravneet was mentioning, which means how can you scale up faster? How can you go at the deep level of, because we know that India is, you need to be really deeply entrenched at the not only tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 cities, and so you have to go far in the distribution network. And for me, these are the moments whereby from a startup, you need to start to have some support to be able to reach that. Traditional incumbent, you may believe that it's difficult for us to shift, but the reality is, I've been doing maybe a motorcycle. The day I'm doing a scooters, for you, it may still be a nice, but the machinery are different. The size of the wheel, the chassis, even the engine will be on a different line. So we are already used to all that matter. And now all what we're bringing is basically a different drivetrain and sometimes, of course, a completely different philosophy of the model. But this adaptability we have, the access to supply chain, we have it for, more than 3 decades. So that's the beauty also, that this is why, again, I think it will be interesting to see in the future, because, and we have seen it actually even Tesla globally. Yeah? Tesla has been doing like more than 80 to 90% market share in the US, and how the legacy so-called incumbents start to come with their products, then they start to erode and start to come down to a regional level. Because at the end of the day, and this is, what was said beautifully about even for later, we're not here to fight among each other in the EV space.
Yeah.
We are here to actually
Make it more
convert
exciting.
ICE to EV.
Yeah. Fantastic. Exciting times to be in the electric vehicle business and generally in the green mobility sector. Thank you, Melo, Randir, Mr. Ravneet, and Mr. Tarun Garg. A fantastic conversation. I'm sure our viewers took away a lot of points from this because mentally it changes a lot. I think it's a mindset thing and hopefully that shift happens soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Niranjan, Sucharita, and that fabulous panel of speakers for that engaging session.